Welcome to Haddonfield and Beyond, your one-stop shop for all things Halloween, Haddonfield, Michael Myers, Dr. Loomis, and some of the beyond things in horror and even Batman. This is our first video as Haddonfield and Beyond together. I did the trailer reaction to Braden Timmons' The Last Nightmare. We actually have another one coming of those with Dean and I both reacting to it, so looking forward to that. Dean, we're going to dive into Halloween Retribution versus Rob Zombie's Halloween 1, a movie we actually got versus something we only know on paper. How are you doing? How you feeling about the rebrand? And how you feeling about Retribution versus Rob Zombie's Halloween 1?
I'm doing pretty good. It was a long weekend. I had a long work weekend, so luckily had yesterday to catch up on rest and all that good stuff. So I'm, refreshed and ready to go today for this. Loving the rebrand so far. I think Haddonfield and Beyond is going to be a ton of fun. A lot of Halloween-centric content to do, and a lot of other fun stuff to bring to the table also. And as far as Retribution versus Rob Zombie's Halloween 1, something we got, which is kind of on the fence for a lot of people, somewhat divisive. It has a fan base, but it's more universally, I think, disliked than it is kind of welcomed. Versus something on paper that sounded pretty fantastic, depending on how well it would have came out as a product. But yeah, we'll dive in, we'll discuss it. I kind of have an idea where my thoughts might go, so I'm ready to jump in.
So, for those of you that don't know and haven't been following some of our Halloween Retribution content at the end of Fandom Empire, we've delved into a few of it here now, or a few different videos now on Haddonfield and Beyond. Halloween Retribution was going to be Halloween 9, essentially, the movie that takes place after Halloween Resurrection. It was written by Judy Appleton and Jim Keeble. We did a video about why it was canceled. Thank you, Miramax and Weinstein's, for that. And by thank you, I mean go F yourselves. Studio interference. The Acads wanted to go forward with the project. They were super excited about it. I believe you said on one of our previous videos that they mentioned they thought it was going to be one of the best sequels they'd ever done. And, on paper, it certainly reads that way, man. So you have this story that brings together not just Freddy, a.k.a. Busta Rhymes from Halloween Resurrection, in a small role, but the two lead roles being Josh Hartnett's John Tate and Charles Cypher's Lee Brackett as the main duo. And, keep in mind, this is 20 years ago, right? So Charles Cypher's isn't as old as he is now and has some more use to him and the ability to carry a part like that. And it becomes this sort of twisted, weird take that takes place across kind of multiple timelines. And, Smith's Grove Sanitarium is a character in the movie. We see what it looked like in the past, and we see what it looks like in the present, abandoned. And then we also have, which I hope we finally get, Snow, a Michael Myers movie featuring Snow. Love the idea of Michael's silhouette walking through a snowstorm. And, it's not just a little snow. It is very much a snowstorm to the point it's affecting traffic and people's willingness to go to certain places. And essentially, kind of because, obviously, we get some new characters in there. You get your Laurie Strode-esque character in there with Lee. But I really think when you look at it, it becomes a little bit of a cat and mouse game between John Tate and Michael Myers. Michael's definitely fucking with him. He has a chance to kill him early on in the script. And then you have Lee, who is just downright out for vengeance, right? Lee Brackett, that is. And so it becomes this sort of unique take of different things coming together. You got an A plot and a B plot. Subjective to what you think the A plot or B plot is, though. But and then you also have the brother to the Laurie Strode-esque character, who is kind of doing a take on Hush before Hush. So I find that unique, and he doesn't make it in the script. And then you got Rob Zombie's Halloween 1. Not to like dismiss it. Chances are you have seen that movie, but don't know things about Halloween Retribution. So I'll say this about Rob Zombie's Halloween 1. It was a financial success for them. It's something that clearly Miramax was, not Miramax, Dimension, and the Weinsteins were basically sabotaging other projects to get to a point where they remade it. And Mustafa Akkad had his untimely passing, and then Malak Akkad signed off with going with the remake. And for me, man, the remake's a mixed bag. The first half of the movie, I really don't give two shits for. The second half of the movie, which is kind of like a shortened version of John Carpenter's Halloween 1, I dig because it's similar to John Carpenter's Halloween 1. Let's start with Rob Zombie's Halloween, pros and cons, and how you think it matches up to Halloween Retribution.
Pros will be the second half. I have to go the second half. It still feels like a remake, but somewhat modernized, with kind of a touch of Rob Zombie's DNA on it. I don't really care for the first half. I didn't need the explanation. I didn't need the the bad household upbringing. Could have done without that. It's. I don't think it's necessary. I think you really get into it from the point that Michael is about to try to go trick-or-treating and gets blown off, and then kind of that's when he takes his all his frustrations out, I guess we'll call it, on the stepdad and on Judith and her boyfriend. The kills, I give a thumbs up to the kills, but that whole first half I could definitely do without. Retribution, as we mentioned, sounds great on paper. Phenomenal on paper. I would have loved to see the execution. Loved to see how things played out in Smith's Grove. You mentioned the cat and mouse game. It's very much, Lee and John Tate playing cat and mouse with Michael, but it's also Michael playing cat and mouse with our secondary cast of characters, which is about 4 or 5 teens who end up stranded inside the rundown, broken down Smith's Grove. So that's something I would have really liked to see kind of play out. On top of the the either A or B plot, whatever you want to refer to it as, with John and Lee Brackett after Michael. Freddy's death, like we mentioned before, very reminiscent of kind of Malcolm McDowell in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. Goes on the book tour and is trying to kind of capitalize on his experience of what happened to him. And Michael's not too fond of that, to say the least. So, we've gotten Rob Zombie's Halloween 1. I've watched both cuts several times. They're okay for me. I would say I probably prefer the theatrical cut over the director's cut for a handful of reasons. I definitely prefer Michael's escape sequence in the theatrical cut. Kind of breaks free and takes out about 4 or 5 security guards. So I think that plays out well. Rob Zombie it's all right for me. I don't go back to it that often. It's just a shame that we haven't seen what Retribution could have been. We kind of get to piece it together ourselves and come up with the general idea of what it would have been. But it's something I would have loved to see, eventually come to either big screen or even nowadays, if it was to get made, even if it went straight to streaming. I would take that. I would just love to see how that entire thing ended up playing out.
Yeah, it's easy to say, hey, here's this movie that was almost made to go up against this movie that was made, but there's so many different variables. You don't know how it would have been received. I got to give Duty Appleton and Jim Keeble some credit, though, because they easily could have been convinced to really bring in Freddy and try to make it like a trifecta movie. And you get the good cop, bad cop sort of thing. Enemy of my enemy is my friend. But in a corny, dangertainment style way. And they don't do that. They get rid of the dead weight very early. Mm-hmm. Busta gets his time in the first act, doesn't even last to the end of the first act, and they move on from him. And I think that was the right call. Then move the focus over to the new characters. but as well as John Tate and Brackett, because for diehards, you're going to be interested in following those two characters. For new fans of the franchise at that time who are just seeing a Halloween movie possibly for the first time, you're probably going to gravitate towards the new characters. And then also having that hush
Mhm.
complex in with that movie, I think added unique perspective to that. Um, the real question is, though, if you had to pick one or the other, it's easy to say, let's go with Halloween Retribution, but you cannot forget the fact that Rob Zombie's Halloween 1, like it, love it, don't care for it, hate it, breathed life back into the franchise for a few years. Now the
Yeah,
follow-up movie has, I could say a bunch about that, but
yeah,
specifically talking about that movie, as much as I don't like looking back at the past, man, um, I really believe that the first, half of that movie doesn't work, and it's because of Malcolm McDowell. Now, I know people will say, well, Malcolm McDowell, Clockwork Orange, and you're right. Like, he's got
yeah,
a great, film history. But when I think Malcolm McDowell, I immediately turn to his Silent Night remake or
yeah,
retelling, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, his character in the show Franklin and Bash. Like, Malcolm McDowell, older in life, plays a lot of goofballs. He's
yeah,
comedic relief. And I don't know if that's the direction they needed to go with Loomis. And even though it's not as um, upfront, not as in your face as what it is in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, I still find some of the conversations with Michael, Kid Michael, there, to just be like, his demeanor just rubs me the wrong way. And I go, I get it. This isn't supposed to be our Loomis, the Donald Pleasance Loomis, but I'm
yeah.
still not buying into this character. So for me, I never bought into him being a serious character. Where did you fall in regards to that before we get to the final answer on Retribution or Halloween 1?
Yeah. Um, I don't know. I never really kind of looked at it through that close of a lens. Now that you mention it, there's definitely things that stick out like a sore thumb. I think in the back half of Rob Zombie's one, he's I think more on par with what we're used to. But in the beginning, the interviews with Michael and trying to kind of break through and figure out why he lashed out and killed half his family and stepdad and all on Halloween night. It does come off as a little kind of I don't know, goofy, I guess if you want to say, or just kind of it's different and it's a little bit hard to kind of take that seriously. So it's a bit strange in the beginning. You kind of warm up to it in the second half, but then by the time you get to Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, it's just he's kind of a little bit off the rails, and everything has kind of gotten to his head, and you definitely see the development and the character change. So, it's kind of tough to pick that as your version of Loomis when you've seen the entire franchise and we're so used to Donald Pleasance, and we kind of were so familiar with the way that he shaped that character. So, it's a Rob Zombie movie. It's a Rob Zombie take, and I guess if that's the job that they wanted done, kudos to Malcolm McDowell for pulling it off. But I don't think it's a version of Loomis that works all that well. And I think hopefully upcoming in the TV series they can revisit his character and kind of bring us back to more of what we know.
And we'll have more of that on either a future video or a video that you've already seen before this one. We've stockpiled a bunch of videos, so how they get released will depend on certain things. I have to ask you, when I read about John Tate in Halloween Retribution, and I think we're gonna have to ask Braden when we interview him, he
Yeah.
comes across a lot like John Tate in Braden's Halloween fan
Right.
film and his
Mhm.
upcoming one, The Last Nightmare. Like, it feels like he's plucked right out of there, and I have a feeling he probably isn't. But I like the growth of the character. He's not that snot-nosed punk that we meet in
Right.
Halloween H2O. So as much as I'm interested in what Brackett's doing and the new character,
Mhm.
I'm all in on the way John Tate's written in this, and I know you and I are going to talk about Duty Appleton in another video here, and the interview he had in terms of the development process. But um, they really did write a good piece for Josh Hartnett to come back and reprise.
Yeah, and he's become nowadays like such a well-known and well-renowned actor. Depending on, I guess, how far tending it's slipping my mind. I forget how far ahead we are from H2O to Retribution. But regardless, I think by aging the character, having the character mature, if they kind of went the same direction that Braden goes and treat the character like that, I think he would have brought a lot of good positives to the table, and probably pretty well received.
Yeah, I agree. So I gotta now go back to Rob Zombie's Halloween 1 before we wrap up here.
Yeah.
Your take on specifically Scout Taylor Compton as Laurie Strode and Danielle Harris as Annie.
Let's start with Danielle Harris. I felt like she did well enough to at least kind of bring back some of what we knew from Annie. Annie was always a little bit of a fiery edge, I guess I'll call it. And I think she kind of brought a very similar feeling to the character. So for the most part, I think she did pretty well. When you get to Scout Taylor Compton, you can see the change in the character. Laurie in 78 is very reserved and, kind of like the bookworm, and, keeps to herself and is very reserved. They break that in Rob Zombie's Halloween. They lean her character more along the lines of those versions of Annie and Linda that we get in Rob Zombie's Halloween. So I don't really like the change. I guess a little bit here and there might have worked to kind of separate that character from the original, but I think it kind of oversteps its boundary a little bit. So I think maybe they could have scaled that back. I feel like they should have probably kept those three characters a little bit separate with each with a different personality, instead of making all three of them so similar. At the same time, you have a group of friends that are around each other all the time. One friend influences the other, and they all kind of end up on the same page. So I kind of see it from both sides, but for me, I would have rather have seen sort of what we got from 78, but maybe not quite as reserved. Try to find that balance in between, I guess, both types of personalities.
I think Scout Taylor Compton's role as Laurie, I have a lot of problems with Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 and the liberties that it takes. And, they finish off destroying Loomis, although I've said on what was formerly known as Phantom Empire, it's a guilty pleasure to watch, man. Like, I find that Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 far more rewatchable than a lot of other flicks. But Scout Taylor Compton, I think she has more to work with in that second movie, despite how silly it gets at the end, or to some people maybe all through the movie. But the first one, I don't think it goes off as well at all. And with the Danielle Harris role as Annie, I know people look back at Nancy Loomis from the original, and like a lot of people fall into the trap of it's the original, so that means it's the best. It's the original, so that means this person played that character, and that's the best. And if you feel that way, that's great. I also have a Danielle Harris bias, so I'll get that out of the way now. Yeah. But I think she plays the role better than what Nancy Loomis did. But I also think she gets way more to do than what Nancy Loomis got, especially when you add the second movie into it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as you were mentioning that, she has, I think, a few, if not a few, at least one more, like, brutal attack scenes in his remake. So her having to kind of pull that off with, the level of fear and screaming for an actor, if a lot of people don't know, takes, like, the wind out of your sails like crazy. It's exhausting. So for her to pull that off, in her attack sequences, and she's covered in blood, and all of that takes toll on an actor. So if people aren't really aware of that, it's a kind of a big thing. So when you bring that into the mix, yeah, I think the hats off goes to Daniel Harris.
Now, we got to wrap up, but I do got to mention the end of Halloween Retribution would have been controversial. Whether it permanently passes the role of the Shape over to John Tate or temporarily, that remains a debate. But either way, it would have been met with similar criticism to what Corey Cunningham has been met with in Halloween Ends. Although I think on paper it's executed better in Halloween Retribution, and at least there's the family connection there at that point.
Yeah.
So it makes a little bit more sense. But it comes down to this, man. Rob Zombie's Halloween 1 or Halloween Retribution. If only one can stay, which one are you picking?
Because of Rob Zombie's take on it, and I'm not the biggest Rob Zombie fan, Retribution is something that we've sort of read. We've got to hear it, and we have a general idea of what it could have been. I would like to see what could have been. So I'm going to go ahead and pick Retribution.
I, too, am going with Halloween Retribution. It's not a landslide, though. Like, I think Rob Zombie's Halloween 1 gets shit on probably more than it deserves. But at the end of the day, I think it's still a good Halloween movie with some missteps. But that Halloween Retribution script, when Malek Akkad and Mustafa Akkad were saying, hey, this is one that we thought was going to be one of the best sequels, I see what they were seeing when saying that. I don't think that's hyperbole. The question is, though, what do each and every one of you think? Do you prefer the thought of Halloween Retribution, or do you prefer Rob Zombie's Halloween 1? Let us know down in the comment section below which one you would pick and why. Let's get a healthy conversation going there. We don't have our live chat anymore, so we're relying on comments after the fact. We'll still be going and doing live streams about once a month. To check out bonus content, though, please head on over to our Patreon, patreon.com/fandomhaven. That's right, patreon.com/fandomhaven, not Fandom Empire. And if you miss our Star Wars content, you can go over to the Legacy of Star Wars on YouTube, the Legacy of Westeros. If you miss our Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon content, that's also available on YouTube. And Dean and I will be here doing all sorts of Halloween and Haddonfield stuff here on the channel. So if you have an idea on something you want us to cover Halloween, feel free to put that down in the comment section down below as well. But for Dean, I'm Sean, and we'll see you next time in Haddonfield and beyond.